All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people out there just like you and just like me. So, whatever happened to the band Bread? David Gates. David Gates was a genius, right? And it was the 1970s, and this band, which was formed in the late 1960s, released some very memorable music. And by the way, that music is still playing on a lot of soft rock stations. And if you're not old enough to know who the artist is, you probably don't know that they're still playing songs like Baby, I'm a Want You, or Make It With You, or Everything I Own. These are just, hook laden songs. And the genius is David Gates. But a lot of people don't realize that this band was feuding, and they broke up only after, 5 years of being in existence. In fact, all the feuding dates back to 1968 when veteran singer songwriter James Griffin, who is already established, hired David Gates as an arranger on the recommendation of a mutual friend, Rob Royer. Along with Royer, they formed a band signed with Elektra Records, which was a big deal. That was a great record label. The Doors were on Elektra, so it wasn't exactly the same type of music. And keep in mind, too, when you think of all the music from the 70s, Bread was there at the very beginning of the decade. So you got to think everything by Bread ended up impacting bands like the Eagles, for instance, or America, or Firefall. And then maybe later, a band like Air Supply was definitely impacted by Bread. And David Gates ends up being this superstar. In fact, David Gates even went on to have a little solo career after Bread broke up. They actually broke up twice, and the second time was for good. Um, but they were supposed to alternate singles, David Gates and James Griffin. Now, the people who like James Griffin, and I do, I don't have a problem with James Griffin. Clearly, though, Gates had established a sound for Bread. And when you heard a song by Jim Griffin, it didn't sound like Bread. I mean, musically to some degree, but also there was more of a country twang in a lot of the music that James Griffin put together. Whereas you have these sort of dreamy, spacey, pillowy, call it, very, very just light and fluffy arrangements from David Gates, lots of strings. These songs were lush and they sounded great, even on AM radio. Um, when you hear them today, and a lot of people, hey, this is the truth. A lot of people didn't like Bread, much like they didn't like Michael Bolton in the 80s. And then later on, they appreciated how great of a singer he is. Whereas a lot of people, again, oh, this is elevator music. It's wussy. It's too laid back. It ends up holding up really well, and that's why a lot of these radio stations who focus test everything out of existence, they keep Bread on their playlists a lot of times. By the way, in case you didn't know, the band got their name when they were stuck in traffic behind a Wonder Bread truck. So their first album bombed completely. Gates and Griffin then added bassist Larry Nechtel and drummer Mike Botts. It could be Knechtel, but I'm pretty sure it's Nechtel. Royer ended up dropping out. Royer was there when the band formed, and he continued to write songs with the group. What they were supposed to do, though, was alternate singles between Gates and Griffin. That went away after a short period of time because Gates' songs continued to chart high and Griffin's songs really didn't chart at all. The band broke up, In 1973, this was probably after a lot of feuding and fighting, and Griffin feeling he's getting the short end of the stick. They then reformed 3 years later to record The Great Lost Without Your Love. A protracted legal battle ensued between Gates and Griffin, who were co-owners of the Bread name. And there was a lot of fighting when Bread went out on tour without Griffin. They got slapped with lawsuits, and essentially everybody was conspiring to stifle Griffin's career. This, according to Mike Botts, who was in the band and who probably didn't want to take a side. A judge ordered that the group could not record, perform, or collect royalties until the case was resolved. The litigation stretched out until 1984. After Bread broke up, Gates wrote the title song for the film of the film version of Neil Simon's Goodbye Girl, which became a top 20 hit in 1978. Soon after, he fulfilled a lifelong dream of running a ranch, just disappearing with his wife and 4 kids to an 800-acre spread in Northern California. He said, at age 48, I'm taking care of the cows, riding horses, and running farm equipment. A satellite dish allows him to keep up with music. This was back in the 1980s, where he watched MTV and VH1. His hobby is predicting what will hit the top 5. And he says he nails it every time. This is going back like 40 years ago. For 14 years, Larry Nechtel worked on his own cattle ranch, but he recently quit the farm and moved to a suburb of Nashville. He's just released Mountain Moods, a new age record, and he's in Elvis Costello's current road band. This was, I don't know how many years ago. A longtime session man with an impressive rock and roll resume prior to Bread, Nechtel admits he was somewhat uncomfortable playing Bread's mellow music. Whenever somebody in the back of the hall would yell, "Boogie," I'd feel damn miserable, he says, because I knew there was no way that this band was going to get up and boogie. So I think the story here is about Griffin more than anybody here. Griffin had moved to Nashville from Memphis, where he'd been living since the band's breakup. He had a group called Dreamer, and he was cutting an album that would include some Bread remakes. Griffin unsuccessfully tried to coax Gates into a reunion. He's comfortable up there playing cowboy, says Griffin. He doesn't want to go out and be, as he puts it, a museum piece. Griffin would be willing to work with the other members, but says, I don't think the feeling is mutual. He's right. Nechtel won't even speak to him. And Botts says, we couldn't forgive and forget that easily. So it sounds like these guys all blamed James Griffin for all of this. What Griffin should have done was just realized, hey, David is the star of the show, and I'm not. But if you go back and listen to all of the James Griffin stuff, you know what? It's pretty impressive. Bread, just a great band, and they should get more credit than they get. And they were absolutely savaged by the critics in the 70s. I can't think of another band that was kicked to the curb like Bread was, because they were popular and people liked that sound. They liked the whole David Gates thing, and the critics hated it. Anyway, should they be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at who they influenced, pretty much everybody in the 70s wanted to sound like Bread. You would make money, you'd earn more bread if you could sound like Bread. So anyway, my little tribute to a band that has been forgotten about, but is still on the radio even today, depending on what radio station you all listen to. I would say go a little deeper into the Bread catalog, and you're going to find that almost every song on every album has radio potential. Not all of them are super commercial. You're going to find that, again, the Jim Griffin songs are, you know, a little bit more rock oriented, a little bit more country oriented. The David Gates stuff, it's pretty much just masterful. Great melodies and great arrangements. The kind of music that isn't going to come back anytime soon. So our hats off to Bread. Yes, they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but they're not. And I don't think they're going to get nominated anytime soon. Anyway, thanks for watching this channel. Please subscribe, and I will talk to you soon.